Hey everyone, it's Aisha and welcome back to my channel. I know I left you guys on a cliffhanger with my last video and I had all intentions of posting the following week. But with the current climate, including the movement with social injustice that's happening right now, I just didn't feel like it was a good time to post regular content and kind of not acknowledge what was going on. That being said, we are back now and I have a huge personal update that I want to share with you guys. Between the last video and this video, I was able to hit over 8,000 subscribers and I thank you all, each and every one of you, for helping me achieve that goal. The road to over 1,000 subscribers was a road that took consistent work, and I don't want anyone also on the same path to ever get discouraged. I think when it comes to YouTube, a lot of people do get either discouraged or kind of turned off because they think it takes a lot of money to get started, and you're constantly comparing yourself to these big YouTube creators who have big budgets and are able to get really great equipment. But the truth is you can be successful without all of that. That being said, I'm so excited to announce I'm actually in the process of creating an ebook on how to build your base from 0 to 1,000 subscribers with little to no money invested in terms of production and creation. Like I said, that is one of the biggest deterrents people have when they are thinking about creating content on YouTube, is that they think it takes a lot of money to get started, and I'm going to show you how I did it with little to no money. I'm going to talk through a number of resources on filming equipment, production, how to utilize all types of free resources on the internet to be able to create high quality work without breaking the bank, because I know a lot of people who want to get involved in YouTube and get started on YouTube don't have a lot of money to pay out of pocket at first. However, I didn't want to stray too far from today's topic, which is the second part to the story I started last time about my nightmare mortgage closing. If you haven't seen that video yet, I definitely suggest watching that one first. I have it linked below in the description. Once you're done with that one, come here for part 2 to figure out how I resolved all the issues I was having while I was refinancing my mortgage with my lender. So where we left last time is that the bank just told me for the very first time that the amount I had to bring to closing was high enough that I actually needed banking statements to support and show that I had that much money in my bank account. To remind you, this came after I had already almost closed once and that documentation wasn't needed, but due to an error on their part, I basically had to start the closing process all over again and go through the loan application again. So the second time around, all of a sudden these banking statements were needed because my closing amount had gone up significantly. This was after a number of other obstacles that had already happened, so I was pretty much at my wit's end when they had told me this. Granted, I had the money, but it was tied up in other investments, and I also told you I'm on the path to paying down a lot of debt, so any money I have left over per month, it usually goes straight to paying down debt. So of course my checking account statement was not going to reflect a super high balance because I don't keep a high balance in there. So I'm thinking through everything I could do, and I realized I hadn't even asked them about if I could use my savings account balance as well, since that is, very close to a checking and it's, cash on hand. So I had to go and get 2 months worth of statements, and for both months had to show that I had that balance. And when I looked at the difference with my checking and my savings and added them together, I actually had the required amount that I would need for the month of April between my checking and my savings. However, I did not have it for March. With me though, I really try to make things happen however possible. So you know what, I kind of crossed my fingers and sent my loan coordinator the information that I had for April to show that I had the balance for April. And I did make a concession and say, I can't prove it for March, but I can show you I did have the money in the month of April. My loan coordinator said they had to submit for an exception. Since I was already a customer, there was a little chance that it'd be approved. But again, like I said in my last video, that this rule was actually instated by the FHA program, which is a government, agency run. So there was very little chance that it would go through. What made it even more frustrating is that I'm sitting here and thinking to myself, if I had closed the original time, if they had reminded me about the paperwork that I supposedly needed to sign, I wouldn't have had to go through this because my closing statement wouldn't have been as high as it is now. So it was just really frustrating because it felt like every mistake and every issue made along the way was still coming back to bite me in the butt, which was even more frustrating knowing that those issues and mistakes weren't my fault. So a few days later, I still had not heard back from my coordinator on whether they had gotten approval for an exception, but I randomly got a call from a different department to schedule my closing. That was a whole issue in and of itself because right before we were about to start scheduling my closing date, the phone line got disconnected. So when I called back, because I hadn't heard back after like 30 minutes after the call, I was put on hold again. And then once I talked to someone and I told them that someone was calling me about closing, I got transferred 5 or 6 different times, had provided my information 5 or 6 different times, because when I told them the situation, they couldn't tell me who had called me and the exact reason that they had called, even though I was telling them I thought it was because of the closing. So once I finally got a hold of someone who was able to schedule my loan closing for me, I scheduled it for the following week. But again, I still wasn't told if my loan had been approved. I was told it was in final approval stages and that someone would follow up with the exact amount I would need to bring to closing. Anyway, so now my closing is scheduled for a week out from when they called me. So I'm still waiting to hear back on whether my loan was actually finally approved and what is the amount that I need to bring to the table. So do you think I heard back from them? Absolutely not, because that was just the trend of what's been happening. So 4 days before my closing, remember last time they called me 2 days before my closing and told me that it was canceled. So 4 days before, I reached out again. I wanted to make sure that all the paperwork I needed to sign was signed, and everyone was telling me that it looked like everything was signed on their end, but they weren't sure. And I'm like, how are you not sure? Don't you work for the company? Can't you see if all the paperwork is signed? Like, I was just really, really confused why no one could give me like a positive yes or no answer. I emailed my loan coordinator, this time super frustrated. I made it clear I was frustrated. So he said, oh yeah, your loan is approved. And again, didn't provide me really information on how much I need to bring to closing, and didn't apologize for the fact that he never followed up and told me that. He said I'd be receiving the closing disclosure with all the final amounts on it within the following day, since my closing was, like I said, within 4 days of being out. And did I actually receive it within the following day? No, of course not. So 2 days later, I followed up again, and they kept telling me, oh, I see the closing disclosure has been generated on our part. I don't know why it hasn't been sent to you. It'll be sent soon. But this time when I got a hold of someone, I was like, no, we're not, like, I'm not waiting anymore. Can you please just manually send it to me right now? So I had her just stay on the phone with me until she sent it to me, because like I told you, I've been told all these lies this whole time, and I had severe trust issues with the lender at this point. So I had her stay on the phone line with me until I received the email in my inbox so that I could know how much money I had to write the check for within 2 days. At this point, I kind of felt a little crazy. Like, am I asking for this much just to like get the basic service that they keep saying that they're going to send to me, and they just never follow up with me? And then when I have to follow up, no one provides any explanation or apology. Like, I don't think I was unreasonable for asking for those things, but in my head, I'm like, what is going on? Like, am I living in the Twilight Zone right now? And wouldn't you know it, when I looked at the disclosure, the amount I had to bring to closing was the original amount from a month ago, and not double like the loan coordinator had said. Now, to be fair, I don't know if they had to do this in order to help me make that exception, since I didn't have the supporting statements, but like, could someone have let me know in the past 2 weeks, since I've been talking to someone like every 2 days about this stuff? Like, I don't even know. So meanwhile, I have my disclosure, but I have like PTSD from the last time where, you know, my closing was canceled with no heads up. So like every hour of every day getting closer, inching closer and closer to closing, I'm like, will I get a phone call? It's canceled. Like, did they send me everything that they needed to? Did I receive everything that I was supposed to? Like, it literally felt like I was walking on eggshells for 48 hours leading up to it. I actually was still super nervous until the closing agent showed up to my house to sign the final documents. Like, even 2 hours before closing, I was like, I don't know if this is even really gonna happen. And yes, they actually had the closing attorney, which is a third party and not associated with the lender, come to my place. That was kind of part of their new COVID coronavirus regulations. So instead of having someone come into an office, they have the closing attorney wear a mask, and they actually come into your house. They ask for, you know, no one to be present except for like a closing witness who was able to sign the paperwork as like a third party to say that this stuff was, you know, not forced, and it was actually signed, you know, by each party's consent. So it was also interesting on like signing the closing from my house in my own house with like this attorney who just like sitting in my couch with me. But nevertheless, I prevailed, and I was able to close my home and finally put all of the stress and madness behind me. And with that, I thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to know what made me refinance my home after only owning it for a year, I actually have a video linked in the description below that talks through all the numbers and how I saved so much money by actually doing this refinance. If you have any questions or if you can relate in any way to the madness I just described, please let me know in the comments below. Like I said in my last video, the reason I tried to share this story, even though it was just so many hardships and obstacles, is that this stuff happens in real life, and I feel like we only hear about success stories from people, especially, in a certain niche market where people are portraying themselves as experts. It's like everyone goes through hardships, everyone goes through, obstacles, and that's kind of what makes this success even sweeter when you achieve it. It's like, I went through all of this to get what I got now. And I created my channel with the intention of being transparent and being relatable to people who are first starting off. Like, you will face a lot of these type of issues. It's not going to be an easy road, but I promise you it will be worth it one day. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a supporter. Thank you for over 1,000 subscribers, and I'll talk to you guys later.